Well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for this town hall. I'm Eric Camino. I'm PPMD's Vice President of Research and Clinical Innovation. When we first learned about the advisory committee for SRP-9001, PPMD quickly joined together with our fellow community partners at Best Day Ever Foundation, Cure Duchenne, Little Hercules, the MDA, and Team Joseph to help ensure that we could present a united and impactful community voice. So I want to start by saying thank you to each and every one of you that joined that effort last week. And we also would like to extend a thank you to the FDA for offering us the opportunity to share our voices through the advisory committee. And we would like to give a sincere thank you from PPMD to all our fellow community partners. It's been a pleasure to work alongside you. And when we mapped out plans for this town hall a few weeks ago, we didn't really have any idea of where we would be. So while we still have a long road ahead of us, we are optimistic. Today, we're going to talk to you about that advisory committee that took place last Friday, talk through some of the next steps as a community, and then spend some time answering questions that you've submitted this past week. We do have several hundred individuals joining us on the line today. So we will be taking questions via the chat. So that's at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to submit any question you have. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can through the Q&A at the end of the talk. But anything we can't cover, we're going to look for kind of themes that we see throughout so we can all kind of help prepare some information for the community. So we have a number of speakers joining us today. So we have Tim Franson, Principal of Health and FDA Practice at Faegre Drinker Consulting, Dave Zook, Chair of Government and Regulatory Affairs at Faegre Drinker Consulting, Deborah Miller, the founder and CEO of Cure Duchenne, Kelly Maynard, founder and president of Little Hercules, Paul Melmeyer, the Vice President of Public Policy and Advocacy at MDA, Marisa Penrod, the founder and CEO of Team Joseph, and Lauren Stanford, Senior Director of Advocacy at PPMD. So this webinar is being recorded. You can look for it in the next week. So share it, with any friends, family who you think this is going to be relevant to. Before I turn it over, though, to Tim to get us started today, we did want to make clear that Sarepta Therapeutics was not involved, consulted, or included in the planning of this town hall. This is something the consortia of community partners planned weeks ago when we joined forces so that we could help bring together the voice of the community and share updates. So all the information presented today is presented on behalf of the community organizations. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tim and get us started for this town hall.
Eric, thank you very much, and thank you to all the community members who've been so actively engaged, especially those who's the committee. It's not my purpose to recant detail by detail the entire 9.5 hours of proceedings. But most would agree it was a very thorough discussion of the issues and opportunities that were covered by both the sponsor, Sarepta, the FDA, including their divisional reviewers from the Center of Biologics Office of Therapeutic Products, and also the patient and parent community who were very appropriately and in a stimulating fashion contributing to the proceedings that led to the final discussions by the advisory committee. For those of you who weren't there, there were 14 voting members of the advisory committee, majority of whom standing committee members, experts in gene therapy and so forth. There were 2 patient representatives. There was 1 non-voting industry representative. And the purpose of having that gathering of individuals by FDA's stated intent is to gather a variety of opinions regarding the safety, effectiveness, and quality of products under review. And so a number of these folks have looked at preceding gene therapies as an advisory committee. And the process is after presentation by the sponsor and the Food and Drug Administration, there is then periods of questions and answers. There was, of course, the open public hearing, where the number of individuals from this community were able to voice their support for the application that was being reviewed. And briefly state the culmination of these proceedings was voting on one particular question after discussion of 4 other topics that were scientific proceedings. That voting question was, do the overall considerations of benefit and risk, taking into account the existing uncertainties, support accelerated approval of SRP-9001 using a surrogate endpoint expression of Sarepta's microdystrophin at week 12 after administration for treatment of ambulatory patients with DMD with a confirmed mutation gene. So after that quite lengthy run-on sentence containing a lot of very important characteristics, there were 8 votes yes, 6 votes no, no votes abstaining. And again, to frame the process, the FDA advisory committee discussion points and the quality of the discussion reviewed, as well as the singular vote, are what FDA now takes into account as they deliver moving towards their May 29th action date. And that action date means FDA on or before that time it is obliged to deliver some kind of clear action pattern that they will undertake, which ranges quite broadly from maybe an approval under the accelerated pathway all the way to request for additional information and additional time for reviewing any information requested of the sponsor. So between those bookends, there are a number of possibilities. FDA is obliged to take the opinion of the advisory committee as firm. They take away the advice from that. Very frequently, the advisory committee opinion is agreed upon by the FDA division. But of course, those folks have differing experience with the review of the application in terms of months by the Center for Biologics reviewers, and usually days for the review of summary information by the advisory committee members. So I think it's fair to say that what we know is that EA is now actively deliberating not only on the advisory committee discussions, but the written comments that were provided by many, and those things will be taken into account as they come forward with their final decision. We know that many members of the community are quite interested and concerned about what would that action be if it takes place. And as I said, without going through the entire range of outcomes, there's quite a broad possibility. But we feel overall encouraged by the strength of the discussions and the community representation, and we would anticipate that there would be some very firm announcement in the very near term. Unless there is a decision for full or for accelerated approval, that we would not know anything about a label or what that does or does not include by the time of the action date. So admittedly, many unknowns, but also much great progress that has come forward. And we're all anxiously looking forward to the outcome of FDA's final deliberations based on yours and others' input. And rather than laboring the discussion, Eric, I'll stop here and see if there are any questions about this. And, I'll apologize if I didn't touch on all of the points that some of you felt were very near and dear to your hearts. Certainly, the meeting of substantial evidence with biomarker, with the criteria for accelerated approval. And of course, we've had a prior webinar that delved into some of those points. So why don't I stop there? Next step back to you, Eric.
No, that's great. Thank you, Tim. I think we started to get some questions in there, but we can address those whenever we get to the Q&A at the end. But thank you for that overview and summary. I think next we're going to hand it over to Dave to talk a little bit more about kind of moving forward and next steps.
Thanks very much, Eric, and good afternoon, everyone. I just want to join with Dr. Franson really in commending all of you for the engagement in this process. Certainly the written comments that were provided to the advisory committee members, I think were very influential. And then certainly the testimony in the open public hearing, which was incredibly powerful and influential and contributing to great momentum, we think, for bringing the families, the patient perspective to bear on this decision making, something that's very important to this community, I know, and increasingly important to the FDA in their reviews as well. So the organizations that are participating in this collaboration have been, as Eric noted at the outset, really thinking about how to keep the momentum going, what to do both before, during, and after the advisory committee meeting. And so now that we're in that phase between the advisory committee meeting and the decision date under the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, we are very focused on a three-part plan. And this is, of course, to continue to bring the perspectives to the FDA specifically. Much of what we did before the AdCom was for the benefit of the advisory committee and the agency, but now, of course, we're very focused on continuing to communicate to the agency. We're using the approach that we had going into the advisory committee around key points and perspectives that need to be emphasized as they make these decisions, but also considering the discussion, of course, that took place in the context of the advisory committee last Friday. We are preparing three elements, as I mentioned. One is the organizations, again, will provide an unsolicited comment. These are all unsolicited communications, but from prior experience, we know they can be considered by the agency. We'll be providing a letter from the organizations recognizing the agency for the advisory committee, and then addressing key points that we want to continue to emphasize for their review purposes. Secondly, we'll be proposing a sign-on letter led by clinical and research leaders in the community, some of whom, of course, were part of the open public hearing, and some were actually part of the Sarepta presentation, but we'll be producing an opportunity for continued communication to the agency from the clinical and research perspective to complement what the organizations bring. And then thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, will be to prepare an updated comment guide and a place for individuals to provide input to the agency as well. We know that the voice of the families, of the community, and of the experts together are what helps to make sure that this decision is made in the right context. All of those topics that were covered in some detail in the advisory committee have to be considered through the lens of the Duchenne community, and that's what we're focusing on. You will get the members of the community. We plan to have that comment guide that I mentioned to you by tomorrow, so that it's available not to really make your comments, but to shape them, to inform them, and make sure that they're delivered in a way that can have the highest impact. So those are the three elements of continuing to work as a community together to inform this process, and very pleased to answer questions that you may have when we get to that portion of the program as well.
Thanks, Dave. I think actually with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lauren, who's going to kind of start the period of kind of the open Q&A.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Just going to echo what has already been said, but we're super grateful for everyone in the community for all of the help these past few weeks. We wouldn't be here without you guys. And with that, we're going to get into answering some of your questions. Some of them were submitted beforehand, and then I'm going to try to pull some from the Q&A in the chat. And our community partner friends are going to help answer some of those questions. So just a heads up, I might call on you if you are a panelist. The first question is, the community is very excited following the AdCom. Do you see this 8-6 vote as a slam dunk? I am going to direct that question to Dave.
Not a slam dunk, Lauren, but certainly as Tim outlined and I emphasized, really great momentum, I think, going from the advisory committee meeting to the decision. And that's why we're engaged in this follow-up, is to make sure that the points that were addressed in some detail in the advisory committee, they can get the perspective of the community. But these, I think Tim mentioned, they often align with the recommendations of the advisory committee, but they don't have to. And so we know that's the case and want to continue to keep the voice of the community front and center.
Thank you, Dave. The next question, which we got quite a few questions relating to this, so I'm going to ask Tim to help me with this one. When should we expect to get more information regarding who is eligible for SRP-9001 and the label?
Sure, thanks for that, Lauren. And let me just say, as a point of reference, having been involved in about 60 drug and biologic approvals over the past 4 decades, the last thing that happens before a final approval is the final label negotiation. So until an accelerated approval action is taken, it's unlikely that we'll get any details on the label. We'll certainly be back and forth. As you noted, I saw in the chat some questions about whether there had been any exons designated in the advisory committee discussion, and it was not in that question. So we would expect not to see those things until we get a final positive action. And when that comes, that usually denotes the indication, whether it's broadly for DMD or whether there are specific target populations, whether there are any age stipulation for those to receive it. Usually based on those kind of factors, that then cascades into the eligibility decisions, access and so forth. So right now, we don't know. It's a waiting game for sure, but we're certainly optimistic for many reasons. And, again, as Dave and Eric have already emphasized as well, due to the tremendous input for the applications discussion at the advisory committee from the community, and perhaps I should get a Nobel Award for his particular advocacy.
Thank you, Tim. So just re-emphasizing there, because I know a lot of you have asked about this, we will not know anything about the label until at least after a decision is made. So the next question that came in is, what if I don't qualify for SRP-9001 if it's approved? What are my options? I am going to pass that one to Kelly.
Hi, thanks, Lauren. Hi, everyone. So the research continues. I just want to sort of use this opportunity to reassure my fellow Duchenne families that the research continues and it will continue. Our advocacy will continue. I also want to point out that the Envision study, which is the non-ambulatory study for gene therapy, for Sarepta's gene therapy, will be opening up pretty soon, we're told, and they will start recruiting. I would also say, look at other clinical trials. There's so many clinical trials going on right now, more than we've ever seen. So maybe talk to your provider about another clinical trial. And also, Sarepta is certainly the first to get their gene therapy here, but more gene therapies are coming along and being developed. So, we will get there. This will continue on and on and on. And we don't have the luxury of giving up, do we? So we keep on.
Thank you, Kelly. The next question is, whatever decision the FDA makes on or around May 29th, is that decision final? I'm going to pass that over to Deborah.
Hi, thank you. And I'd like to extend thanks to the whole collaborative effort also of everybody working so hard for this. So yes, we are hoping and expecting that it will be a positive decision. In the case that it's not, it's just a no for now. And there is a lot more to do after that. The Sarepta would then file for a full approval, submit a new application for a new approval. And I'm going to ask all the experts here to correct me if I'm wrong on this. And then they would continue to collect data, complete the confirmatory trial, and then submit this package. Unfortunately, it would be a delay of, going to say maybe super optimistically a year, perhaps more like 18 months. But again, I'll let somebody else chime in if they feel differently about that. So chances are very good at that point that it would be approved upon full approval. And so we'll just keep our fingers crossed that it's now, not later.
Thank you, Deborah. So in light of a potential approval, is Sarepta obligated to deliver the phase 3 data in a certain timeline? I'm going to pass that over to Tim.
Sure, Lauren, happy to address that. And the accelerated approval process initially was authorized in 1992 during the AIDS epidemic to expedite matters. That's been a groundwork that's been built upon, and the most addition to that foundational legislation has been in the December omnibus reconciliation that was passed by Congress. And it included a couple additional points for accelerated approval that would be relevant here. So if a compound such as Sarepta's is approved under the accelerated approval pathway, there are obligations for completion of confirmatory trials. Obviously, as you heard at the advisory committee, those confirmatory studies are already in process. Therefore, that's very encouraging. The accelerated approval new provisions include a reporting obligation of every 6 months from a company under accelerated approval to the FDA as to progress with their study towards ultimate completion. There may also be other things such as manufacturing, even preclinical things that are negotiated between industry and FDA. And that's why it's important as we lean into encourage those things to be done in timely fashion so the community is fully informed of the attributes of the compound.
Thank you so much, Tim. And I have another question for you right now, so don't unmute yourself yet. The next question is it possible we will see faster development of other gene therapies if SRP-9001 is approved?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And I think we have to be cautious about some of our assumptions. It was certainly clear from the advisory committee reviews that there remains a very firm standard of substantial evidence. And so any gene therapies in progress now are likely to still meet the same standards. And we will have a good idea of what flexibility FDA is going to provide their Sarepta decision. So we should know more. And perhaps there will be some components there that would help things move somewhat more rapidly through review process. The thing that would be even more encouraging, however, would be that the fact with an approval, accelerated or otherwise here, that's likely development companies who are thinking about being involved in this space with DMD, and that could be a very helpful development to forward in the longer term. So perhaps some short-term benefits, definitely an enhanced engagement by many developers as this goes forward.
Thank you. The next question is, what steps can I take today to understand if I might be eligible for SRP-9001 if it's approved? I'm going to pass that one to Eric.
Thanks, Lauren. And it's a good question. I think one of the most kind of important things you can do at this stage, if you're wondering about that, is to talk to your clinical care team. They're going to be the best suited to help you answer that question, to decide, is gene therapy right for you or your family? So we would really encourage starting those discussions if that's something that you're interested in. And each hospital system is going to have a bit of a difference in terms of potential access to these as we kind of move forward. The other thing with this is there was mentioned during the advisory committee, potential contraindication with certain genetic variants. So if you're not super familiar with your or your child's genetic variant, it's a good time maybe get out that genetic report. You can talk to the genetic counselors at PPMD if you need help understanding that a little bit better. You can talk with your clinical team as well. And then finally is kind of keep your eyes open for all of the information that comes out on all of our respective websites. I know PPMD is obviously going to get as much coverage and access in information up there as soon as possible, and I know all of our partners provide that as well. So as that goes forward, as we learn about the label, as Tim said, we're a little bit in the dark right now for the specifics of it, but you can kind of start those types of discussions now with your care providers.
Thank you, Eric. Is there anything that families can be doing to prepare for insurance coverage of the gene therapy if it is to be approved? I'm going to pass that over to Kelly.
Thanks, Lauren. Yes, there is. So if you get your health benefits through an employer that is self-funded, go talk to your HR department, your benefits manager about this as soon as possible. If you don't know if you work for an employer that is a self-funded employer, a self-funded employer is an employer that pays the cost of all of their employees' health claims. As you can imagine, smaller self-funded employers, might look at a price tag on some of these gene therapies, and we've seen, in recent history, there may be some sticker shock. So what I would encourage you to do is go to your HR department right now as soon as possible and get this ball rolling with them. If you work for a fully insured employer, you can come to us at Little Hercules Foundation. Part of the Duchenne Family Assistance Program is we can review your insurance coverage, look at it. We can look at your health plan and we can see how they've covered gene therapies in the past. And also, it's going to take a while. I just want to caution everyone that there are large commercial payers that won't make a review right away. This is not going to be something that is just set up right on approval. I'll give you an example. United Healthcare has a policy for all of their health plans that says any newly FDA approved drug, they have 6 months to come up with coverage for criteria, and anything submitted, a claim submitted within that 6-month time frame or before they issue a policy of coverage will be denied, but you won't necessarily know that's why it's denied. So you can reach out to us. We can take a look at your health plan. For Medicaid, it's the same with the Medicaid DUR and P&T process. It's going to take all the state programs quite a bit of time to review and publish criteria and set it and schedule it for a DUR and P&T committee hearing. What we will be doing here at LHF is, as those policies, we're watching for them in real time. As those policies are available, we will be posting them on social media. And we will be participating in all of the DUR and P&T committee hearings and all the state Medicaid programs. And we may be reaching out to you if you live in a particular state as a patient to participate and tell your story as well. So just want to caution that this is going to take some time, not only for, we heard during the AdCom that it's going to take Sarepta quite a few months. These gene therapies, it does take them quite a few months to ramp up and actually get to actual dosing, right? It's also, there's going to be a lag where these health plans come up with how they're going to cover it. So, but, I'll just leave it there. It's a good time to plug the Duchenne Family Assistance Program. My partner, Maurice, is on here. I'll put the website in the chat. One of the services we offer is questions about your insurance. So you can go to that website, fill out an application, and just select, questions about insurance coverage. And the appropriate staff member will get back with you on that.
Thank you, Kelly. And
did I hit all the points?
You did. And I'm just going to reemphasize, definitely reach out to Kelly and her team if you have questions. They're experts on this stuff, and it's an exciting time. So I know they'd be happy to help. The next question is, how do you become a patient representative for the FDA? And I'm going to give that to Paul.
Thanks so much, Lauren. And hey, everybody, this is Paul Mellmeyer with the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Let me also just start with a word of gratitude for, of course, the collaboration with everyone here, but also for PPMD hosting us today. It's a very good question. And as you all saw last week, the patient representative, Buddy Cassidy, played an incredibly important role in the proceduring, the procedure of the day. Round of applause for Buddy. That's right. He was absolutely fantastic. And truly, the day would not have been the same if it wasn't for Buddy representing the community as well as he did. The good news is that the FDA is always hoping and wanting for additional patient representatives to join their program. As I was talking with the FDA shortly before this advisory committee hearing, and they were saying that they expect more Duchenne therapies to be making their way through FDA's approval process. Consequently, there'll be more advisory committee hearings. Consequently, maybe Buddy's not available that day. They're going to need somebody else to be serving as a patient representative. So for anybody who's interested in participating as a patient representative at the FDA, first of all, you see the role that you would be playing on an advisory committee hearing. You'd be playing a very similar role to what Buddy did last week. And in order to participate, there are some qualifications, if you will. For one, that you have to go through a conflict of interest process. FDA wants to be sure that you're not being paid on the side for your participation, or you don't have some other influence perhaps in your viewpoint. But as a patient representative, as an individual with Duchenne, or in some cases, FDA also looks for parents of children with Duchenne. In that case, they do hope for additional folks from the Duchenne community to be participating. So I'll read off the email if you're interested in participating yourself. It's the FDA Patient Rep Program, all one word, FDA Patient Rep Program at fda.hhs.gov. I don't know if I can actually put that in the chat, as I don't believe I'm a host. But again, that's FDA Patient Rep Program at fda.hhs.gov, if that's a role that you would be interested in playing. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, Paul. And I know we're going to send a follow-up email, which includes the written comment guide. So I will be sure to also put that email in there. And like Paul mentioned, you'd be playing such a vital role if you were able to do that. So I highly encourage anyone who's interested in doing that. And we have one more question, and this one is for Dave. So the question is, as parents, if we submitted written testimony prior to the AdCom, should we also submit additional comments to the FDA now?
Yes, we would encourage that. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to provide a way to do that effectively. And again, the discussion in the advisory committee probably provided some insight, if you were able to listen to that, to the areas of focus for the FDA in this review. And what you want to think about is how can your experience, your perspective help them address that in the context of living with Duchenne. So we'll have a little bit more detail on that in the guide, but please do consider continuing to participate whether or not you commented before the AdCom.
Thank you, Dave. And I know there were some other questions, and I promise we are going to try to put some materials together that try to hopefully answer all of those. But thank you to all the community partners and our friends, Tim and Dave at Fagery, for answering all of those really good questions. And thanks to all of the community members for submitting them. And with that, I will pass it over to Eric to close us out.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, so as Lauren mentioned, we're going to pull some of those other questions out of the chat and try to make sure that we write some of that up to help everyone who had questions. And so please feel free to reach out to us at PPMD, any of the other organizations. I know we're all happy to help answer those. I did see a number around some of the kind of the mutation question, and I just wanted to direct everyone, if you search kind of the NIH held a multi-sponsor meeting and webinar a while back, kind of talking through some of those adverse events. That's on our website, as well as I know a number of our community partners have that information hosted there as well. But I'd like to thank all of our community partners for joining us. I think it's been a tremendous effort from all of these organizations, from all of you. Your time and commitment has been tremendous to helping us get to where we are today. So again, we're really excited and optimistic for things moving forward, and we will be sure to stay in contact and let you know how you can continue to make your voice heard. And just thank you for everything all of the families do. So thanks, everyone.